The headset crackled 3 times before I realized there was no car in the drive-thru. It was 3:03 a.m., and the sensor kept going off. Beep, pause, beep. Like something was passing the detector, but the cameras showed only wet asphalt in the yellow light. I adjusted the headset and whispered the standard protocol, "Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order?" What answered me was not a human voice. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that for 5 years, I worked at different McDonald's locations across the United States, Nevada, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Washington. 5 states, 5 experiences that made me question not only my sanity, but the very nature of reality. Today, I'll share these stories with you, not because I seek understanding or absolution, but because some truths need to be told, even if no one believes them. If you want to descend one more step into this pit, download our exclusive ebook, Horrors Beyond YouTube's Reach Await You. The link is pinned in the comments. Before continuing, I must warn you, these stories involve situations of psychological violence, stalking, and events that defy rational explanation. If you are a minor or sensitive to disturbing content, you may want to stop here. But if you choose to continue, be prepared. Because once you know certain places, certain patterns, certain coincidences, they come to know you too, and the golden arches will never look the same again. My first mistake was accepting to work the night shift. The McDonald's on Sahara Avenue was located in a forgotten area of Las Vegas, far from the casino lights. The only activity came from truck drivers and a few lost souls wandering the city after losing everything at the gambling tables. It was the perfect place for those looking to disappear for a few hours. The manager, Mr. Murphy, gave me just one rule that first night. When the drive-thru sensor goes off, you always look at the screen first. Always. If there's no license plate, there's no car. If there's no car, you don't roll down the window. Got it? I asked why. He just repeated, "Don't open the window." For 2 weeks, I followed this rule religiously. The sensor worked perfectly during the day, but after midnight, it began to glitch. It would trigger for no apparent reason, once, twice, sometimes 3 times per shift. I'd look at the screen, see the empty asphalt, and ignore it, until I started noticing the patterns. The sensor always went off at 3:03 a.m., always 3 times in a row, 47 seconds apart, and always, when I was alone in the kitchen, making breakfast. In the 3rd week, I decided to time myself. I picked up my phone and waited. 3:02, 3:03, beep. 47 seconds later, beep. Another 47 seconds, beep. My skin crawled. It wasn't a technical defect, it was systematic. That's when I first noticed. A smell of cold oil and wet iron began to seep through the air conditioning unit whenever the sensor tripped. The odor was subtle at first, but grew until it became almost unbearable, as if something were rotting inside the ventilation ducts. In the 4th week, I broke the rule. The sensor went off promptly at 3:03 a.m., first beep. I glanced at the screen. Empty asphalt, the golden arches, reflection distorted in the oil puddle near the curb. The smell of iron began to intensify. 2nd beep. The screen still showed only the empty drive-thru, but something was different. The reflection of the M's in the puddle seemed inverted, as if looking up from below. 3rd beep. I walked to the window. Murphy wasn't there to stop me. No one was. Just me and that lying sensor who insisted there was something waiting outside. I placed my hand on the window latch. "Welcome to McDonald's," I muttered into the void. "Can I take your order?" And then, from the absolute darkness beyond the island of light of the drive-thru, came the answer. "Order 303, as always." The voice was mine. Exactly mine. But I hadn't spoken. I opened the window. There was no one outside. No cars, no people. Just the desert night wind carrying grains of sand and that intense smell of rusted iron. But when I looked down at the puddle near the curb, I saw my own reflection staring back at me. The reflection blinked first. I jumped out the window and ran to the back of the restaurant, my heart hammering against my ribs. I called Murphy, but it went to voicemail. I tried calling the main office, but the line was busy. I tried to leave, but the back door was locked from the outside, something that never happened. I spent the rest of the night leaning against the wall farthest from the windows, watching the security screens. Nothing. Just the empty drive-thru and the golden arches swaying in the breeze. At 6 a.m., when the day shift arrived, the back door was unlocked. Murphy showed up an hour later and asked me how my night had been. No problem, I lied. The sensor had some issues, but nothing major. He stared at me for a few seconds. Then he walked over to the cashier's computer and checked something on the screen. Interesting, he murmured. We had a 303 order at 303, paid in cash. No customer name? I felt my throat dry. It must be a system error. It must be. He walked away, but before he left, he turned around. Oh, and you followed the rules, right? You didn't open the window when the sensor went off. I lied again. A week later, I requested a transfer. I didn't explain the real reason. I just said I wanted a change of scenery. Murphy signed the papers without question, but before I left, he grabbed my arm. Where are you going to work now? Florida, I replied. A unit in Jacksonville. He nodded slowly. Be careful with the rules there. Every place has its own. I pulled out of the parking lot without looking back, but when I stopped at the first light, I adjusted my rearview mirror. McDonald's was 3 blocks away, but I could still see the golden arches silhouetted against the dark sky, and they seemed to be watching me back. That same night, in another state, another employee would discover that some rules exist for good reasons. Moving to Jacksonville felt like a fresh start. The McDonald's on Phillips Highway was located in a busy commercial area with a spacious PlayPlace that attracted families throughout the day. Colorful structures, interconnected tunnels, slides, the kind of place that should radiate childlike joy. It should. My supervisor, Janet, guided me through the first week. She was a practical woman in her 50s who knew every inch of the restaurant. The only peculiarity I noticed was her obsession with the PlayPlace after hours. Never, ever, enter the red tube after 10 p.m., she said on my 3rd day, as we closed up. And if you hear any noise coming from there in the wee hours of the morning, ignore it, always ignore it. What kind of noise? The kind that makes you think there are children playing inside. She locked the PlayPlace door with 2 padlocks, a detail she hadn't noticed before. But there are never children, you know, never. I asked about maintenance and structural issues. Anything that might justify the paranoia. Janet just repeated, don't go in the red tube. For the first month, everything went smoothly. The PlayPlace was cleaned every morning. The children played happily during the day, and after 10 p.m., everything was silent. Perfect silence. Until the October rains arrived. Tropical storm. Elsa hit Jacksonville on a Tuesday. With 50 mph winds, torrential rain, and intermittent power outages. The restaurant closed early, but I stayed to help clean up. Janet had gone out to sort out insurance issues, leaving me alone for the first time. That's when I heard the first creak. It came from the PlayPlace, a low, metallic sound like rusty hinges slowly moving. At first, I thought it was the wind shaking the external structure, but the noise was internal. It was coming from the tunnels. I ignored it, following Janet's advice. I continued cleaning, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the dampness of the rain creating an almost suffocating atmosphere. But the creaking persisted. It would pause for a few minutes, then start again, always coming from the same place, from the red tube. At 11:45 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and approached the PlayPlace. The area was dim, lit only by emergency lights. The rides cast strange shadows on the walls, creating shapes that seemed to move in the periphery of vision. The creaking stopped the moment I stepped into the play area. Absolute silence. I shone my flashlight on the red tube, a cylindrical section that connected the main structure to the slides. From the outside, everything looked normal. Bright red plastic, clear windows on the sides, and an entrance wide enough for a child to fit comfortably. It was then that I noticed the smell, cold oil and wet iron. The same odor he'd noticed in Nevada, now mixed with the musty damp. It came from inside the tube, as if something were decaying inside. I shined the light into the tunnel. Empty. Completely empty. But the interior walls were different. The plastic, which should have been smooth, had circular marks on it, like small handprints. Dozens of them, covering the entire interior of the tunnel. I moved closer, ignoring Janet's advice. The marks weren't scratches or damage. They were positive impressions, as if tiny hands had pressed against the plastic from the inside out, trying to get out. And in the center of the tunnel, where it curved, there was something that took my brain a few seconds to process. Condensed breath. Small clouds of vapor clinging to the plastic, like when a child blows on a cold window. But there was no one inside. The creaking started again, this time very close. It came from above, from the upper tunnels. It wasn't metal moving. It was plastic expanding and contracting, as if the entire structure were breathing. I instinctively recoiled, but something caught my peripheral attention. Movement. In the reflection of one of the tunnel windows, I saw a small shape moving inside, too fast to define, but definitely present. I shined the flashlight back into the tube. Nothing. But when I lowered the light, the handprints on the walls had shifted. I fled the PlayPlace area and spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, my back to the wall, watching the shadows dance at the edges of my vision. The smell of iron and oil lingered until dawn, mixed with something new, something sweet and cloying, like stale candy. Janet arrived at 7 a.m. When I told her about the noises, she just nodded, as if she'd expected it. "I warned you about the red tube." "But I didn't go in," I protested. "I just looked." His expression changed. "That's different." We spent the day as normal, but I noticed Janet avoiding the PlayPlace area. During the morning cleaning, 2 employees worked in pairs on the structure, never alone. And when a child tried to enter the red tube during lunch, Janet quickly redirected him to other toys. That night, when we closed, she installed a 3rd padlock on the PlayPlace door. "Something changed," he murmured as he tested the locks. "After you looked. They know you saw." "They." She didn't answer. She just handed me a phone number. "If you hear the creaking tonight, call this number. It's the Austin, Texas facility manager. He'll know what to do." I took the paper, but something about the number seemed familiar. The last 3 digits were 303. That night, alone in the house, I heard creaking noises coming from the ceiling. Small ones, like something the size of a child was crawling through the pipes. 2 days later, I requested a transfer to Texas, and for the second time, I felt something follow me as I left the city. The Austin facility was located at a rest area off Interstate 35, strategically positioned to capture long-haul drivers. It operated 24 hours a day, with a constant flow of truckers, overnight travelers, and people who simply needed a well-lit place to catch their breath. The manager, Rick Donnelly, greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Janet called me," he said. "She told me about her experience in Jacksonville. It's different here, more direct." "Direct how?" "Here they don't stay in the shadows, they come to you." Donnelly showed me around the facilities. Everything was standard: kitchen, cash registers, food court. But when we passed the restrooms, he stopped. 3 booths. Use the first or the third, never the middle one. And if the clock says 3:03, don't look in the mirror. For nothing in the world, don't look in the mirror. The rule seemed too specific to be a coincidence. Why 3:03? Because that's when they're most active. He checked his watch, 2:30 p.m. You'll understand when the time comes. My first night shift was uneventful. I attended to a few late customers, cleaned the machines, and prepared breakfast. The restrooms remained silent, except for the low hum of the ventilation and the occasional drip of a faucet. But on the second night, at 3:03 sharp, I discovered why Donnelly had warned me. I was cleaning the food court when I heard the noise. It was coming from the men's restrooms, the sound of a door opening and closing. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was testing each stall. I grabbed the all-purpose cleaner and walked over. "The restaurant is closed for cleaning," I announced. "If you need to use the bathroom, you'll have to wait a few minutes." The noise stopped. I entered the bathroom. The 3 stalls were empty, the doors open. Everything was clean, everything was normal. But there was something in the air, that familiar smell of cold oil and wet iron, now mixed with something chemical. Chlorine, maybe, or formaldehyde. That's when I noticed the mirror. It was foggy, as if someone had taken a hot shower in there. But there were no showers, no source of steam, just that impossible condensation covering the entire reflective surface. I reached over to clean the mirror. My hand was just inches from the surface when I saw the reflection. It wasn't me. It was someone wearing the same uniform, in the same position, making the same movement. But it wasn't my face. He was younger, with darker hair, and a different color of eyes. And he was smiling, a smile I definitely wasn't wearing. I instinctively recoiled. My reflection, the false reflection, remained in the same position for a few seconds before moving, mirroring my movements with a 2 or 3 second delay. I left the bathroom and leaned against the hallway wall, trying to process what I'd seen. Hallucination, stress, lack of sleep. It had to be one of those things. But when I looked at the clock on the wall, the numbers glowed red. 3:03. I spent the rest of the night avoiding the restrooms. When the morning crew arrived, I told Donnelly about the foggy mirror. He just nodded and made some notes on a clipboard. "It happens," he said. "Ventilation problem. Let's take a look." But when we passed by the restrooms an hour later, the mirror was perfectly clean, not a single steam mark. On the 3rd night, I decided to test the limits of the rule. At 3:02, I positioned myself in the bathroom hallway, watching the digital clock on the microwave in the kitchen. 3:03 arrived like a weight in the air, an almost physical pressure that made my ears pop. The sound immediately started again, doors opening and closing. But this time I could see the stalls from the entrance. The middle door moved on its own, opening slowly, pausing, closing with a soft click. I went into the bathroom. The door stopped moving the moment I stepped onto the tiled floor. Absolute silence, except for the hum of the fluorescent light. I glanced at the mirror, completely fogged up again, condensation dripping like tears. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a message written in the condensation. The letters were trembling, as if traced by a finger. "Do you see me?" I didn't answer, I didn't move. I just stood there staring at those impossible words as they began to fade, droplets of water running down the mirror. New words appeared. "I see you too." That's when I heard breathing. It wasn't coming from the mirror, it was coming from the middle stall. Slow, controlled breathing, like someone trying not to make a sound. But there was something wrong with the rhythm. Too long on the inhale, too long on the exhale. It wasn't human. The door to the middle cabin began to open. I didn't wait to see what would come out. I ran out of the bathroom, across the restaurant, and out the front door. I stood in the parking lot until dawn, watching the interior lights through the windows. At 6 a.m., when the day crew arrived, I went back inside. Donnelly was in the kitchen making coffee. "How was your night?" he asked without looking at me. "Calm down." The lie came out automatically. He turned, studying me. "Are you sure?" "Because the security system recorded movement in the restrooms at 3:03, and you're not on camera leaving." I felt my throat dry. It must have been a recording error. It must have been. He poured 2 cups of coffee and offered me one. But here's the interesting thing. The cameras showed you going into the bathroom, and they showed you coming out too. At the same time, 2 of you. I almost dropped the cup. That's impossible." That's what I thought. Donnelly pulled out a tablet and showed me the recording. There I was, walking into the bathroom at 3:03 a.m. And a few seconds later, there I was again, walking out the front door. 2 simultaneous moments, 2 me's. What does this mean? It means you broke the rule. You looked in the mirror at the wrong time. He put the tablet away. And now they have a fingerprint of you. I requested a transfer that same day. Donnelly signed the papers without resistance. But before I left, he handed me a sealed envelope. "For the manager of your next unit. He will need this information." Inside the envelope was a photo from the security cameras. 2 identical figures stood in the bathroom hallway, facing each other. but only one of them cast a shadow. 3 days later, I was driving to Ohio, carrying with me the certainty that something had been left behind in that mirror, something that wore my face. Cleveland greeted me with gray skies and the smell of rusty metal in the air. The East 55th Street location was in a rundown industrial area, surrounded by abandoned factories and empty warehouses. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen, or when they had no choice. The manager, Marcus Webb, was a burly man with scars on his hands and a manner of speaking that hinted at experiences he preferred not to share. When I handed him Donnelly's envelope, he opened it, read the contents, and nodded gravely. "So you're already being tracked." It wasn't a question. That complicates things. Tracked by what? For who you've become. He put the papers in a locked drawer. "Every place you visited has left a mark. Nevada, Florida, Texas. They've taken little pieces of you. And now they're putting something together." Webb led me upstairs to a small office overlooking the restaurant. The windows were mirrored from the outside, allowing me to observe without being observed. "Here the rule is different," he said. "It's not about what you do or don't do. It's about recognizing when you're not you anymore. Like this, you'll know." He adjusted the blinds, blocking out some of the outside light. "When the time comes, you'll know." The first sign appeared in the second week. I was working the morning shift when a customer approached the counter. An unremarkable man in a navy blue jacket. He ordered a coffee and a McMuffin, a routine transaction, except for one detail. When he spoke to me, he used my name, my real name, not the one on the uniform tag. "Are you sure we don't know each other?" I asked as I prepared the order. He smiled. "I'm sure you will." I paid cash and left. But when I checked the receipt, the order was registered as number 303, and when I reviewed the security cameras later, there was no record of him entering or leaving the restaurant. In the third week, things escalated. I arrived for the afternoon shift and found Marcus in the office, watching the security cameras with a tense expression. "You're early today," he said without looking at me. I checked my watch. "No." I arrived at the usual time, 2 p.m. "Yeah." He showed me the screen. "So who's that?" The footage showed someone in a McDonald's uniform entering through the back door at 1:30 p.m. Same height, same build, same haircut. From the back, it could easily be me. It must be a camera date error. "Recording is from today, real time." Marcus paused the image, and he's still here. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Still here, in the bathroom. "He went in 20 minutes ago, hasn't come out." He stood up, grabbing a radio. "I'll call security." Wait, something was stopping me from involving the authorities. An instinct for self-preservation or simple morbid curiosity. "Let me take a look first." Marcus stared at me for a few seconds, then nodded. "Careful. If it's not you, then we don't know what it is." I walked down the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the empty hallway. The restaurant was closed for cleaning. It was just Marcus and me in the building, or should have been. I stopped at the door to the men's room. Silence. "Cleaning staff," I announced. "I need to check if everything is okay." No response. I pushed the door open slowly. The bathroom looked normal. 3 stalls, 2 sinks, a clean mirror. But there was something in the air, that familiar, nauseating smell of cold oil and wet iron. I checked every booth. All empty. It was then that I heard breathing behind me. I turned slowly. There was someone in the doorway. A figure in a McDonald's uniform, standing against the hallway light. The light was positioned so I couldn't see their face, only their silhouette. But I recognized the posture, the tilt of the head, the way the arms hung at his sides. It was identical to mine. "Who are you?" My voice came out as a whisper. The figure didn't respond. He just took a step forward, stepping into the fluorescent light of the bathroom. The face staring back at me was perfectly familiar. It was my face, but there was something wrong with the eyes. They were too deep, too dark, like wells that led nowhere. "I am you," I said with my voice, "that's the real you." "That's impossible." "Nevada," he continued, ignoring my answer. "Florida, Texas, little pieces left behind. Now I'm whole." The other me smiled, but the smile was predatory. It revealed teeth that seemed slightly too sharp, too white. "Thank you for building me." That's when I noticed he wasn't projecting a reflection in the mirror behind him. Run. I crossed the restaurant, took the stairs two at a time, and burst into the office where Marcus was monitoring the cameras. He looked up, alarmed. "Call the police," I gasped. "Now." "Why? What happened?" "There's someone down there, someone who—" Marcus pointed to the monitoring screen. "There you are, alone in the bathroom." I looked at the screen. There I was, standing alone in the bathroom, talking to the air, gesturing to an invisible presence, looking completely insane. That's not possible. There was someone with me. Cameras don't lie. Marcus paused the recording. "And get this. You came in once, but left twice. 5 minutes ago." I felt my world crumble. On the screen, I could see two identical figures exiting the bathroom from different angles. One went through the front door, the other went upstairs, to the office where we were now. "Marcus," I whispered. "Who came up here?" He looked at the screen, then at me. His face paled. "You came up here, but I am me. So who's the other one?" We heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, measured, climbing step by step with the same cadence I would use. Marcus pulled out a key and locked the office door from the inside. "There's an emergency exit," he whispered, pointing to a window in the back. "Go, now. And you? I'm going to find out what this thing wants." The footsteps stopped at the door. 3 soft knocks. "Marcus," it was my voice on the other end. "Is everything okay there?" I looked at Marcus and he looked at me. The voice was identical, but there was something artificial about the tone, like an actor playing a role he hadn't quite mastered. "Go," Marcus whispered, "and don't come back anywhere. You can't work at McDonald's anymore." "Why?" "Because now there are 2 of you and only one can be real." I opened the window and climbed down the fire escape. As I touched down in the parking lot, I heard voices coming from the office. 2 identical voices arguing over who was the real one. 3 days later, they called offering me a transfer to Washington. The voice on the phone was polite, professional, and slightly familiar. It was my own voice inviting me to the next state. I refused and moved to another city. But sometimes, when I pass a McDonald's, I see someone in uniform watching me through the windows. Someone who moves like me, who smiles like me. Someone who is building a life that should be mine. 3 months after Ohio, I was working at a body shop in Portland when I got the connection. "We have a position in Washington," the female voice said. "Above average pay, night shift, quiet area. Interested?" It wasn't McDonald's. It was an independent employment agency. A third-party company, a temporary contract. Nothing that could be traced back to the restaurant chain where he'd worked. I accepted. The McDonald's in Forks sat on the edge of the Olympic National Forest, a secluded structure surrounded by ancient pine trees that blocked most of the sunlight, even during the day. The facility operated primarily as a roadside outpost for truckers and adventurous tourists who got lost on the forest trails. The manager, Dale Morrison, was a thin man in his 60s with eyes that looked like they had seen too much. "Here, don't you look familiar?" he said during the interview, studying me with uncomfortable intensity. "I don't think so. First time in Washington." He made some notes. "Well, the rule here is simple. When the main generator fails, and it will fail, it always does around 3 a.m., you shut everything down. Lights, machines, sound system, everything. And you're in the dark until it comes back on. Why not use the auxiliary generator? Because the assistant calls them." Dale closed the folder with my documents. "And you don't want to meet them." The first week passed without incident. The generator worked perfectly. The night shifts were peaceful, and the only sound from the forest was the wind in the pine branches. But in the second week, I discovered why Dale had warned me. It was 2:45 a.m. when the lights began to flicker. I was cleaning the drive-thru when I noticed the lights flickering in sequence. First the kitchen lights, then the dining room lights, and finally the exterior lights, like an electrical surge running through the entire system. At 2:58 a.m., everything went black, complete darkness, the kind of darkness that only exists far from civilization. where there's no light pollution to soften the night. I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the electrical panel, but then I remembered Dale's warning. Turn everything off. Stay in the dark. But why? I sat on one of the benches in the hall and waited. The forest around me was too silent. No insects, no wind, no rustling of dry leaves, just an oppressive silence that seemed to press against the windows. It was then that I saw the first pair of eyes, small points of yellow-green light in the tree line, about the height of a 10-year-old child. At first I thought they were animals, skunks or raccoons, but there was something about the way they stared at me that was distinctly intentional. The eyes moved, not like an animal moving through the trees, but as if they were floating, slowly climbing the trunks of the pines. More eyes appeared, dozens of them, scattered throughout the forest in a perfect semicircle around the restaurant, all at the same time now, all watching me through the dark windows. My hand instinctively found the auxiliary generator switch. "Don't do this," a voice in my head whispered. Dale said not to do this, but the darkness was becoming suffocating, and those eyes, there was something hypnotic about the way they blinked in sequence, like ghoulish Christmas lights strung between the trees. I turned on the auxiliary generator. The lights came on instantly, bathing the restaurant's interior in a sterile white glow. I sighed in relief and glanced out the window to confirm the eyes had disappeared. They hadn't disappeared. They were closer. The artificial light had drawn them out of the forest. Now they were at the edge of the parking lot, and I could see whose eyes those creatures belonged to. They weren't animals. They weren't human. They were something in between. Small, child-sized, but with the wrong proportions. Arms too long, fingers that extended like dry twigs, skin like wet bark, and tiny horns, barely 2 centimeters long, sprouting from their foreheads like malformed buds. They walked to the windows. His hands, if you could even call them hands, pressed against the glass. His fingers were impossibly jointed, bending at angles that would have made human bones snap. They left wet marks on the glass, impressions that looked like sap mixed with something darker. One of them covered his eyes with his hands and started counting, like in hide and seek. The others disappeared. They didn't run. They didn't walk. They simply dissolved into the darkness beyond the outside lights. But I could feel their presence around the building. Small scratches on the ceiling, soft taps on the walls, the sound of something small and nimble testing every possible entrance. The creature in the window finished counting and opened its eyes. When he saw me looking back, he smiled. The smile revealed teeth like pine needles, sharp, too numerous for a normal mouth. And then he began to draw something on the glass, fogged by his breath. An M-N. The golden arches, but inverted, like horns. The restaurant phone rang. I answered automatically, still mesmerized by the creature in the window. "McDonald's restaurant. How can I?" "Shut down the generator." It was Dale's voice, tense and urgent. "Now. Dale, how did you?" "Now." I turned off the backup generator. The lights went out instantly, plunging everything back into darkness. For a few seconds, I heard nothing but my own pounding heart. Then, slowly, the noises faded. The scratching on the ceiling stopped. The pounding on the walls fell silent. And when my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the creatures had returned to the trees. The main generator came back on at 3:47, just as Dale had predicted. The next morning, he arrived earlier than usual and checked all the windows. The creatures' marks were still there, but they were already beginning to fade, as if they were made of something evaporating in the sunlight. "You turned on the auxiliary." It wasn't a question. "Sorry." They saw you." Dale wiped the glass with a special cloth that smelled of pine and something stronger. "Salt, maybe. Now they know you exist." "What are those things?" "Ancient, older than the forest, older than anything that should be here." He finished cleaning and looked at me. "And now you're part of the pattern." "What pattern?" Dale pulled a folder from a locked filing cabinet. Inside were photographs, reports, newspaper clippings. Everything related to McDonald's in various states: Nevada, Florida, Texas, Ohio. And in the center of it all, a photo of me, taken from a Cleveland security camera. "You've been tracked for months," he said. Not by us, by them. Every place you worked was a collection point. They were gathering information, learning about you. Who are they? Something that uses the franchise as a communication network. The order numbers, the schedules, the specific rules for each location. It's all part of a larger system. Dale closed the folder. And you're the first human to complete the circuit. I felt my mouth dry. What does that mean? It means you're now the central hub, the connecting point between all locations. He put the folder away again. Doing tonight? When the generator fails, they won't be standing outside watching. Are they going to come in? No. Dale took his keys. You're leaving. That night, when the lights began flickering at 2:45 a.m., I was already waiting in the parking lot. The generator failed promptly at 2:58 a.m., but this time I wasn't there to see the eyes in the forest. I was driving away, as fast as my car would go. But in the rearview mirror, I saw something that haunts me to this day. The McDonald's lights came back on. Not the electric lights, those remained off. But a yellowish-green glow emanated from inside the building, the brightness of the eyes. And as I rounded the last bend before losing sight of the restaurant, I saw a familiar figure standing in the entrance. It was me, or something that looked like me, waving. It's 3:03 a.m. as I write this. I don't know why I always wake up at this time. Maybe it's force of habit. Maybe it's something deeper, a connection I've never been able to completely sever, no matter how far I run. It's been 8 months since Washington. 8 months working jobs that have nothing to do with fast food, living in towns that don't have a McDonald's within 30 miles. I thought I'd escaped, but this morning, I found something that changed everything. I was checking my email when I saw a message from McDonald's. Subject, transfer approved, management position. I hadn't requested any transfer. I hadn't applied for any management position. But when I opened the email, there were full details of a new unit opening. Location, a small town in rural Brazil. Salary, 3 times what I'd earned in any previous job. And a personal note from the regional director. Dear my name, based on your unique experience at our Nevada, Florida, Texas, Ohio, and Washington locations, we believe you are the perfect candidate to oversee our new restaurant concept. This will be a different experience. We look forward to hearing from you. At the end of the email was a phone number. The last 3 digits were 303. I called. McDonald's, new concept development. A familiar voice answered. It was my own voice, but with an accent I'd never had. How may I help you? I received an email about a management position. Ah, yes, we've been waiting for your call. The other version of me chuckled softly. You have a very specific experience with our special locations. What special places? Those where the rules are different, where certain entities manifest more easily. Pause. And where you left pieces of yourself behind. I felt my blood run cold in my veins. Who are you? I am you. The you they created from the collected fragments. The you who accepts the rules instead of breaking them. The voice grew colder. And now we need to reunite. I will never work at a McDonald's again. You don't have to work. The other me laughed. You'll manage. You'll oversee the creation of new collection points. You'll help expand the network. What if I refuse? So we'll continue demonstrating in other places. Your girlfriend works at a fast food restaurant, right? Your sister goes to that shopping mall with the food court. Your mom loves to have breakfast at the McDonald's down the street. My throat closed up. Leave them out of this. Then accept the position. I hung up the phone, but it rang immediately. Luis, there's no point in running, my own voice said when I answered. You're part of the network now, always have been, since Nevada, and the network is growing. For the past 8 months, I thought I'd escaped something. Now I realize I was merely being prepared for something bigger. The 5 locations were no coincidence. They were stations, collection points where parts of my identity were cataloged, studied, replicated. And now they have enough information to create as many eyes as they need. Yesterday, while shopping, I caught my reflection in a shop window. It waved at me. When I turned around, there was no one there. This morning, my neighbor mentioned that she saw me leaving early for work. I had slept in until 10:00, and now, at 3:03 a.m., I can hear someone in the kitchen, making coffee, softly humming the McDonald's jingle. It's my own voice. If you've walked through the night with me, you know there are even deeper steps. Download the exclusive ebook at the pinned link and enter, if you dare. I need to go now. He's calling me from the kitchen, saying we have a lot to talk about, that there are plans to make, new places to visit. Order number 303 just came in again, and I'm not even at work. Question for the comments. What detail did you notice first? The order number? The smell of oil and iron? Or the voice? Tell us in the comments, but be careful what you reveal. Some patterns are better left unidentified.